Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all are well. Today's lesson is going to be called The Price of Communism. And it's interesting, we talked a great deal this semester about two genocides. The first, the Holocaust, and we must never forget the Holocaust. It was the great moral lesson of our time. You have industrialism meets mass murder. Never before has that happened, and never since. As educators, we do a pretty good job of it. However, what we don't do is talk about the other genocides, the communist genocides, like Stalin's Holodomor. That claimed 10 million lives. So today we're going to look at the price of communism and what communism has done in the 20th century. As you know from your readings, there is a book put out by Harvard University Press in 1999, and it did this awful tally of the communist countries in the 20th century, and the death toll reached almost 100 million. So we can't forget those victims. We should never ever just judge genocides on strictly numbers. But when you look at the major genocides, the numbers are astounding. Stalin's Holodomor, 10 million. Stalin's crimes in general, upwards of 20 million. But in China, the numbers are much, much worse. And of course, as I said, we cannot just go on numbers. Every victim has its stories. But China, they do believe the number of victims at a lower end is 30 million. At the higher end is 70 million. No one really knows. It's in between that figure. But if we just take the lower number of 30 million, that's the whole population of Canada. That is a staggering number.
The leader of Communist China was Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was born a farmer, but he was a poet, a revolutionary, and a dictator. One of the many quotes attributed to Mao Zedong was that when there's not enough to eat, people starve to death. It is better to let half the people die so that the other half can eat their fill. Quotes like these are still used today in popular culture. Millions starved, others executed as enemies of the state. Kulaks, rich peasants, intelligentsia, just like Stalin's Russia. In fact, a new word was used with Communist China, democide, taking out an entire strata of society.
Mao Zedong's great leap forward and cultural revolution claimed millions. Even today, China continues. We know that the doctor who raised the alarm about the coronavirus was disciplined and silenced. The world is still looking for answers from China. Did they know more than they told us? Were they keeping secrets? We don't know, and I think in the coming months there will be an investigation into it. China continues to persecute and put into concentration camps or holding places, holding centers, we don't really know, its Uyghur minority. 31 years ago this year, there was a grassroots rebellion against the Chinese communists. And of course, it was brutally suppressed at Tiananmen Square in 1989. Google went in to try to set up shop in China, but after a few years, it had to pull out because, of course, the Chinese government would not allow it to publish or to be truthful in its searches. And you all have been watching the news. Before the COVID outbreak, one of the major stories was the Hong Kong protesters trying to maintain their democracy, trying to counter the influence of China. In Nazi Germany, 1945, 46, and 47, as you have learned about already, there were the Nuremberg trials. The majority of the Nazi criminals were brought to justice, and now we have the International Criminal Court in The Hague. However, most communist countries, with the exception of Cambodia, have never had a trial, have never had any form of justice for the victims of communism. In the 1970s, a communist revolutionary group supported by China tried to take power and did take power in Cambodia from about 1975 to 1979. The leader of this was Pol Pot, and his Khmer Rouge troops were fierce and vicious and brutal. They, of course, killed all their enemies of the state. They had concentration camps. They shot prisoners or beat them with axes to save bullets. Pol Pot wanted to empty the cities and bring everyone into the countryside, where he set up slave labor camps. He wanted to get back to an agrarian medieval state where no one lived in the cities and everyone was happy farmers. Of course, it was a bloodbath and a disaster. They actually killed more of a percentage of the population than any other genocide. That is 25%. 2 million Cambodians died in the killing fields of Cambodia between 1975 and 79. This is the only communist country that's actually been brought to task. Pol Pot, of course, died before the trials, but just recently, in the last few years, they've had trials to try to bring justice to the victims of the Cambodian genocide. So Pol Pot's Cambodia Khmer Rouge, one would think, of course, that the West would oppose this brutal regime, but it didn't, because, of course, Cambodia at that time was at a war with Vietnam. America had just gotten out of a war with Vietnam, and it needed all the friends it could in the region. So, as the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and in fact the American government allowed and supported Pol Pot and his Khmer Rouge. There's a great documentary I want you to see. It's only 10 minutes long. It's Christian Amanpour, Scream Bloody Murder. So I'm going to leave that documentary for you. I want you to watch that. It is startling. And study hard, don't panic, and be well.